到邀請嚟到進行一個獨立嘅選舉監察團啦。咁呢個選舉監察團咧係有啱啱好似 Andy 所講咧，係有10個國家嚟自不同嘅地方咧嚟到去監察，嚟到去俾意見咧，係呢個香港所進行嘅呢個區議會選舉有啲乜嘢我哋可以睇到或者係建議到嘅。咁我對我自己嚟講咧係一個非常之榮幸，一個好特別嘅一個機會啦。因為唔單止我自己本身頭17年嘅人生咧係喺香港度嚟到生活嘅，更加我所代表嘅呢個選區叫做 Steveston Richmond East 嘅呢個選區咧，係喺加拿大南邊嘅一個城市叫 Richmond。咁呢個城市裏面咧係超過1半人口咧係華裔嘅人口嚟嘅。咁所以對我哋嘅選區嘅人口嚟講係香港發生嘅嘢咧係非常之緊貼我哋。咁但係亦都唔係淨係喺列治文呢個 Richmond 呢個地方。列治文係大溫地區嘅一個城市，喺大溫地區裏面咧亦都有好多華裔係居住。然後除咗大溫地區之外咧，我哋 BC 省咧亦都有好多嘅華裔，甚至到我哋整體加拿大華裔係少數民族當中嘅一個最大嘅一個群體啦，有超過200萬嘅加拿大人係喺華裔嘅呢個圈子裏面嘅，咁包括好多喺安大略省多倫多等等嘅地方。咁但係就算除咗加拿大之外咧，對世界各地嚟講，香港所發生嘅嘢咧，亦都係緊扣我哋嘅心嘅。咁亦都係可能點解我哋今次呢個團體又有咁多唔同嘅組織、唔同嘅國家嘅代表咧嚟到我哋當中。我哋加拿大人咧，其實好分享到香港人所爭取嘅自由人權法治嘅精神同埋追求嚮往一個平穩、一個安定繁榮嘅生活嘅呢個訴求。亦都可能係點解咧？加拿大嘅官式反對黨，亦都係我自己保守黨嘅黨領 Andrew Scheer 咧，佢喺啱啱過去嘅聯邦大選嗰裏面咧，係曾經講過話 We are Hong Kongers。咁呢個係代表咗其實香港人所爭取嘅同我哋加拿大人嘅核心價值咧係一致嘅。咁我哋見到今次嘅選舉咧，亦都能夠有機會可以去提供到一個少少嘅功能咧，咁我哋感到非常之榮幸嘅。我將時間交翻俾我哋嘅 MC。
Thank you very much. We move on to Lord Hartley to continue.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you. First of all, let me say how much of a privilege and a pleasure it's been to participate in this independent electoral observation mission. And let me pay tribute to those who've organised it, the enthusiasm that has gone in at this very grassroots level to making sure that these elections would be properly observed and that they would be carried out in a transparent and fair and free way shows an extraordinary commitment to democracy. And I'm very impressed that a lot of the organisers are young people, but who know that their future depends on the entrenchment of democratic values in Hong Kong. But let me also pay tribute to my colleagues. You've heard they're from 10 different countries, Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, United States, Slovakia, Lithuania, Malaysia, Japan, Sweden, Denmark, and from many varied backgrounds as well. Again, both ends of the age spectrum, but also from different walks of life. And it's been a pleasure working with them over these last couple of days and observing, as we have done, this extraordinary outpouring in this amazing election that took place yesterday. Unprecedented turnout, more than twice the levels of the elections 4 years ago. And even now, I'm still trying to take in some of the statistics that I've been given about the numbers of votes that were cast, but the 452 district council seats all being contested, with more than 1,000 candidates taking part in that, with nearly 3 million people voting, shows that people in Hong Kong want more democracy, not less, and that there is a real thumbs up that has just been given to democracy, the rule of law, free speech, the values that Hong Kong has embraced over many decades and does not wish to see surrendered or disappear. I was very struck as we visited polling stations yesterday and we met candidates and we met people who were out campaigning on the ground. We saw voters. I was struck by the calm I was struck by the dignified way in which people were going about things, but I was also struck by the professionalism of those who were running the polling stations. At Sha Tin, for instance, we met a firefighter who was the presiding officer there, and not only was he incredibly professional, but he had a real enthusiasm for what he was doing, and there were families arriving with their children. This is what you would hope to see and want to see. But when you contrast it with what's been happening in Hong Kong over these last 5 months, you can see what an amazing achievement it was by all those who have been campaigning for democracy to ensure that this was a peaceful process that was undertaken yesterday. So this demonstrated for me an appetite for more, not less. What did I take away from, well, things that could be perhaps done in a different way in the future? One thing would be the voter registration issue. And I think all of us, and you'll hear more about this in due course as the press conference continues, all of us are concerned that there is no direct linkage to the residential qualification of someone participating when they go to vote. And this can lead its way to irregularities. It can lead to electoral fraud, not just in Hong Kong, but in other jurisdictions as well. So there's a lesson maybe to be learned from that. And we felt as well that although by and large, in the generality of things, this was an extremely well-conducted election, as I say, with vast numbers of people coming out to vote. Nevertheless, there are some small lessons that can be learnt, and I think that the need for an independent commission, which is a unanimous view of all of us as observers, an independent electoral commission, so not an arm of government, as is the case at the moment, but standing separate from government, able to then look at irregularities or complaints about the personation of voters or the inducement to voters to vote for a particular party or particular interest group. All of those things need to be investigated. They didn't dominate the day yesterday, but there needs to be a process, a mechanism for investigating such things in the future. But for me, the most glaring example of irregularity and perhaps characteristic of the ineptitude that has sometimes been shown over these last few months in dealing with events as they've unfolded was the banning of Joshua Wong from being able to stand as a candidate in these elections. Now, I have a particular reason for mentioning Joshua. I am vice chairman of the Westminster Parliamentary Friends of Hong Kong, but I'm also a patron of Hong Kong Watch. I served in the lower house, now in the upper house, so for 40 years at Westminster, and before that I stood in local council elections. I contested 7 parliamentary elections and several local government elections, but I cut my teeth in local government as a student being elected when I was 21 years of age. So yes, of course, when you meet Joshua Wong or Nathan Law, you meet people who you remember from your youth who should be cutting their teeth in local government today and becoming tomorrow's future leaders. So I was particularly distressed that Joshua was prevented from being able to stand for election. But I was distressed for another reason, because Joshua was due to come to Westminster to receive an award. And only last week he was told by the courts here that he could not travel to the United Kingdom to receive that award. It is the Westminster Award, which is given by a group of parliamentarians from both houses, bipartisan, left, right and centre, and the award is given for a commitment to human rights, human life and human dignity. So given that Joshua was unable to come to Westminster, I brought the award here. And this afternoon, I'm glad to say that Joshua will be presented with the Westminster Award for human rights, human life and human dignity. But I hope that the next time there's an election in Hong Kong that Joshua will be a candidate. This is one of Asia's greatest cities. And coming, as I do, from another great city, the city of Liverpool, where we have, and there's a competition between Kenny and I about this, but we have, I think, the oldest Chinese community in Britain and one of the oldest in Europe. My first visit to Hong Kong was 40 years ago as a young member of the House of Commons to stay with Hong Kong families who came from my constituency in Liverpool. So direct links back into the past but into the present as well. And there is a real fear amongst people with family in this part of the world that the trajectory which Hong Kong was on under two systems, one country, the commitment to autonomy, the commitment to democracy, the commitment to human rights and free speech, that is being emasculated. And all of us here today, we hope that the message, the clear-cut message coming out of yesterday's terrific vote will be that we don't want less, we want more democracy, an extension of franchise and opportunities for people to play their part and to have their say. In great cities like Liverpool, but cities like London, Paris, Berlin, New York, there are directly elected mayors, if you will, chief executives who run those cities. And I think that Hong Kong would be well advised, and I would say that mainland cities in China would be well advised too, to look at those models to see if the franchise could not be extended and the models of governance changed so that you can have more accountability by those who govern places like Hong Kong and that they're not simply appointees from outside the jurisdiction. Let me come to a conclusion. This unprecedented enthusiasm we saw yesterday represents a real opportunity to end the paralysis that Hong Kong has been experiencing. I would say directly to Carrie Lam, do not squander this opportunity. Don't waste this chance. Here is a moment. A window has been opened for you. Listen to what people have been saying. I hope that as the anthem from Les Mis has been sung, can't you hear the people sing? Well, I hope you can hear how the people have spoken and also that you will look at the way people behaved yesterday and see that that is the way that Hong Kong must go. Kenny ended by talking about the way in which people now see themselves as Hong Kongers, in the way that people saw themselves as Berliners. And all of us, most of us in this room, I think, were privileged to live through the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. It was unprecedented, it was unexpected, and it brought back together a city that had been divided. And the bamboo curtain that in some ways divides this society and divides this part of the world must go as well. And I think that we saw the beginning yesterday of reform, opportunity, change, but that is now down to people themselves to press on with this and not to waste this opportunity. So I feel very privileged to have been here, to have met people on the street. Some of the candidates, people like Jimmy Shan, we met yesterday afternoon, someone who'd been beaten up in a vicious, brutal attack before the elections began, not part of the election process. But I was delighted to hear this morning that he had been elected yesterday in these elections, and I think that does bode well for Hong Kong and for the future. Thank you. So, go next.
Thank you very much, Dr. We will now move on to Dr. Anthony to continue the remarks.
Thank you, and good morning. I represent here the Parliament of Lithuania. Lithuania was the first country to lead the process of democratization in the former Soviet Union 31 years ago, and has to break away from that empire. And on the 23rd of August, Congress enacted Hong Kong Way, which was a sort of kind of a reprise of the Baltic Way 30 years previously, when 2 million people stood in a peaceful chain to demonstrate their commitment to freedom and democracy. And I remember that sort of popular surge for freedom in the Baltic countries, and I feel that's a very similar surge for freedom and democracy, the rising wave in Hong Kong today. It's popular feeling, which expressed itself in unprecedented sort of turnout for yesterday's election, doubling the previous numbers. And I was privileged, together with the team from 10 countries, to observe the process. And first of all, I want to thank the team who went into a number of precincts and who stayed until small and sometimes not so small hours of the morning to observe the electoral process. And I'm going to summarize our findings. First and foremost, and I think the most important remark is that regardless of the fact that the numbers of those participating were doubled and went beyond all expectations of participation, the elections were conducted in an extremely smooth, peaceful, competent and orderly manner. And all that we remark afterwards should be sort of seen in the light of this overriding remark. That this was a very sort of competently conducted, very orderly election. And having observed elections in a number of countries, from Georgia and Ukraine to Taiwan, I sort of, believe me, I've seen sort of chaos, and I've seen sort of what can happen sort of, when the elections are not properly conducted. So what we saw yesterday, regardless of the fact that people had to wait in queues, sometimes for a very long time, nevertheless, the order and peace prevailed, and I think this is a great achievement of electoral commissions, as well as of the public who are willing sort of to cooperate to make this process very smooth. I will not repeat sort of what Lord David Alden said. The observation of the elections does not limit itself only to the day we arrive at a situation which is already predetermined by the process of nominations of candidates. So, sort of the fact that the foremost opposition candidate was not allowed to be nominated and stand in the election, I think is a sort of to the detriment of the democratic process. And also we have to mark with regret the fact that a number of candidates were assaulted both before and during the election process. We, as election observation team, we could not enter the precincts under the existing regulations, so we had to observe from the outside. Of course, our observation limited itself to the election day and the aftermath in the counting. What we noticed, and as I said, these remarks, they can be sort of made in countries with long democratic traditions. Also, there are things which could be better, which could be sort of run differently in a better manner. So they should not be taken as sort of in any way denying the overall observation that the election was conducted in a very sort of smooth and orderly manner. But we have to know the presence of the police inside the voting stations, which is not a democratic practice, and their role in the election process should be more clearly delimited. There clearly was sort of no clear sort of guidelines, probably because we saw sometimes policemen guarding the voting stations from the outside, sometimes going in, sometimes observing live the voting process. There were also groups of people carrying GoPro cameras outside and lingering outside polling stations with not clearly defined roles. So our delegation believes that the police should remain impartial to the entire electoral process. Also, sort of a note of concern was inconsistency in the handling of the queues, which gave rise to speculation that sort of some age groups are sort of being privileged in some areas and others elsewhere. So more clear regulations would be required. Voter registration process is an area which is gives rise to some concern, and I think that this is liable to be ought to be reformed. Voters did not previously need to submit proof of address to be registered, and implementation of such policy gives rise to the possibility of planting voters on electoral lists and vote rigging. Also, there were a number of reports, video footage, messages, and such informations about incidents of irregular activities. There is often presence of red packets to the voters who voted for a designated candidate. We have to note the absence of an orderly review procedure of such claims, and a more proactive central electoral body activity in investigating such claims and such incidents. So they remain at the level of isolated incidents, but there ought to be a sort of a kind of review procedure and a more proactive procedure at that. And likewise, we have to note the lack of independent electoral entity, truly independent, truly impartial electoral entity to conduct the electoral procedure. And so, sort of in combination with the existing political, I think there is a sort of considerable scope for reform. But as I said in the very beginning, this should not be taken in any way to sort of cast any sort of shadow of a doubt on the sort of validity, orderliness, and competence of the electoral process. So these are our findings, and I will not go beyond that. I think what has been said about the importance, my colleague Maria will sort of pass to the next stage, recommendations, but I just want to thank the organizers of the mission, and I want to thank the people of Hong Kong for the opportunity and honor to be present at what I believe is going to be seen as a historic moment.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the recommendation by our listeners.
Thank you very much. I'll continue on the note Mr. Andomedas has started. Slovakia has just celebrated 30 years of our freedom. And maybe one thing we have learned over the 30 years, which was repeated numerous times during this evaluation of this period, was that freedom and democracy have to be nurtured on a daily basis. So this would maybe be a recommendation to Hong Kong as well, that democracy and freedom is never guaranteed. It's something people have to struggle for and nurture on a daily basis in order to guarantee it. As it was already said by many of the previous speakers, we really admire the way how the elections were conducted. It was order, there was peaceful process, and our role is to give recommendations in order to maybe meet some international standards we are aware of in other countries, just to help the process for the future to be more transparent, to be more open and more democratic and more free. So, a couple of recommendations. We all know that freedom of speech is a condition sine qua non of any free and fair elections. And it was already mentioned that the case of Joshua Wong or other cases we have discussed with certain candidates who also mentioned that they don't believe that there is a freedom of speech in this country completely guaranteed. And that's why we would suggest to uphold the freedom of speech in order to support more free and fair election. We were also, another recommendation would be to assess the feasibility of establishment of an independent electoral committee, as was also suggested or mentioned by Mr. Andomedas, that we believe that this committee should, first of all, look into the irregularities, which there were certain irregularities we have heard of. Of course, we do not have an evidence of them, but this is exactly what is the role of an independent electoral committee, to look into the different cases where people could address with the different cases, and the electoral committee should look into the cases individually to see if they cause any threats to the elections or not. This would also help in the process of make the transparency of the voting registration list also more transparent and open, as we had heard that there were certain doubts about how this list was created, and there were certain changes of the law, how the list is being open to scrutiny or not. Then we also thought, hearing the cases of assaults against candidates before the elections, that we believe that the candidates should be offered protection when requested, as just to guarantee the peaceful process of the elections and the campaign before. We were also thinking that what might help the transparency of the electoral process is to review and clarify the role of domestic and international observers in order to conduct impartial observation, but also in order to enhance the transparency and maybe bring up further suggestions to the next electoral processes. Seeing and observing the different practices, as Mr. Andomedas has mentioned, at the different polling stations, we thought that there should be more regulated discretionary powers of the officers at the polling stations, So there are rigid and rigorous sets of standards and rules which should be kept at every polling station, so the standards are equal and the same at every polling station. We were also thinking that seeing the queuing and the waiting time was very long, we thought that in order to really provide for a speedy process of the elections and not to discourage people to take part in the elections, would be good to increase the numbers of the polling stations in certain districts, so people do not need to queue for that many hours. And maybe the last suggestion was also that we should, seeing the different roles of the police at the different polling stations, as Mr. Antomedes mentioned, we thought that the police should not be involved in any mechanics of the elections. We don't know if this was the case, but of course we would suggest that this should be absolutely guaranteed by the electoral law. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the delegates that fed into his recommendations. Now we will move on to Annie Lee, the organiser of the CEOM, to give some remarks of the organisers.
Thank you, delegates, for sharing your insights on the elections. Now, the district election has not happened in vacuum. It was against a backdrop of suppression, intimidation, and threats during the current social movement in Hong Kong. Hong Kongers have made it clear that we will not be silenced. We have shown our desire for genuine democracy through unprecedented levels of political participation. Over 70% of Hong Kong's eligible voters, including the so-called silent majority, have spoken. They have given a landslide victory to the pro-democracy parties by, as at 8 a.m. this morning, 351 seats to 45 seats. Now, none of these victories would have been possible without the sacrifices of the thousands of protesters who have been arbitrarily arrested, detained, assaulted, and subjected to political prosecution throughout the last 6 months. As we deliver these remarks, the Polytechnic University of Hong Kong remains under siege by the Hong Kong police force, with the situation of protesters trapped on site amounting to a humanitarian crisis, as accredited by international experts. The will of the Hong Kong people is clear. Hong Kongers want genuine universal suffrage to elect their own representatives, which is not a gift, but a promise yet to be fulfilled by Beijing. This historic district council election has provided a rare glimpse of optimism during these months of despair. The landmark turnout and landslide victory remind us that democracy is crucial to enabling peaceful political change. But these election results should not blind us, nor the international community, to the fact that Hong Kongers are paying an incredibly high price in their fight for political freedom within the framework of meaningful autonomy. That fight is still ongoing, and our city remains on a cliff edge. A truly sustainable solution to the future of Hong Kong must be built upon the principles of liberal democracy. The international community often implores both sides of the Hong Kong protests to engage in meaningful dialogue to resolve the current political impasse. Hong Kongers have chosen democracy. Now, it is up to the government and Beijing to respond in a way that honors the will of the people. We also implore your government, international communities who are watching this press conference, to join our fight for freedom and to stand with Hong Kongers. We have promised our fallen brothers and sisters to carry on the fight. And we will continue the struggle for the fundamental values of liberty, justice, and autonomy as long as it takes to set them and our city free. Thank you. I shall repeat this in Cantonese.
Have a drink.
Yeah. 我哋翻廣東話。啱啱嗰場區議會選舉咧，唔係就咁一場選舉嚟，佢係我哋經過咗半年香港呢一場社會運動，我哋有無數嘅香港人被政治壓迫，我哋俾人襲擊，我哋俾人迫害，我哋俾人恐嚇。喺呢一個環境底下發生嘅一場選舉，香港人尋日超過70%出咗嚟投票，我哋好清楚咁話俾全世界知，你唔可以連我哋聲，我哋唔會就咁就退縮，我哋好清楚咁樣表達到，我哋要嘅係真民主、真普選。琴日我哋包括呢個所謂尋日大多數嘅人都出到嚟，有超過70%嘅選民去投票，投咗我哋截到今朝8點鐘351席對45席，呢個非常之清晰嘅結果出嚟，係去支持香港嘅民主。但係與之同時，呢個係喺我哋有成過千個手足、過千個香港人嘅犧牲、建築犧牲之上，達到嘅一個咁嘅情況。只有話有個情況，佢唔係一個，佢本來就唔應該係需要咁多嘅香港人去用包括自己嘅性命犧牲而換翻嚟嘅一個成果。因為我而家喺度同大家講緊、分享緊呢個咁嘅結論嗰陣咧，我哋理工大學依然係俾香港警隊圍攻緊，裏邊嘅手足、裏邊嘅學生係喺一個人道災難嘅情況底下。係喺呢一個咁嘅環境底下，我哋有呢一場咁嘅選舉，無疑我哋當然佢係一個向前好嘅一步，但係佢唔能解決我哋而家佢未曾解決晒我哋香港而家面對嘅問題。香港人喺尋日嘅選舉裏邊表達到。我哋希望自己去選我哋自己嘅代議士，我哋自己嘅政府。而呢一個咁嘅權力咧，香港人未有嘅，北京仲未有俾呢個權力我哋。尋日係香港歷史上面重要嘅一頁，佢俾咗我哋睇到。喺呢6個月嘅抗爭底下，佢俾咗一絲希望我哋，睇到我哋嘅出路可能會係點樣嘅。如果我哋係要起一個香港人能夠接受、能夠相信、能夠真誠熱心咁出嚟參與嘅一個制度，尋日嘅選舉可能會係重要嘅一步，但係頭先好似我哋其他嘅delegate都講過，民主唔係天跌落嚟。喺我哋爭取民主嗰陣，但係點解我哋都做得咁爭取民主咧？因為佢係 香港未來政治制度重要嘅一個基石，以至於我哋願意冒咁大嘅風險，我哋願意俾出咁大嘅犧牲喺呢6個月嚟，我哋都好堅定咁樣爭取民主，屬於香港人嘅民主。呢個城市嘅政府係要由香港人去選出嚟，係要去為香港人去負責嘅。國際社會咧喺呢6個月期間咧，已經多次去呼籲香港呢個運動雙方嘗試揾一個和平嘅對話，去解決呢一場嘅矛盾。香港人咧揀咗民主，而家我哋拋個波俾香港政府，俾北京政府。我哋希望佢哋可以回應香港人嘅呢一個訴求，一從呢場選舉裏邊彰顯出嚟嘅主流民意。與此同時，我哋亦都呼籲咁多位國際政府嘅領袖，同我哋一齊爭取自由，支持香港人。我哋會繼承我哋失去咗嘅手足嘅勇士，佢哋嘅遺願。我哋會繼續堅定咁去爭取。我哋本來應該係基本嘅人權同埋自由，我哋會爭取自由，我哋會爭取公義，我哋會爭取港人自決。我哋希望見到有一日，我哋個城市係一個自由，係一個大家可以好安全、好安心喺度過大家想要嘅生活嘅一個香港。多謝大家。
Thank you very much to all our speakers. Now we will open for the floor to ask your questions. Please hold up your hand if you want to ask anything so our colleagues can pass the mic to you.
They should ask them to say who they are as well. Yeah. Can they give their credentials, Andy?
Testing. Hi, I'm Simon from Stan News. My question is, there is still protests being trapped in the polytechnic universities, and a lot of them are students, and some of them complained yesterday that they cannot cast their votes because obviously they were trapped in the campus and they cannot go out. Once they go out, they may be arrested by police. Do you think that this is a violations of election regulations, or even the violations of human rights, and what the government, Hong Kong government, do to stop this crisis? Thank you.
All of us have followed the events at PolyU, but also across the Hong Kong's universities, and I speak as a professor at one of the universities in Liverpool, have been horrified to see the way that young people have become engulfed in the violent standoff that has taken place, and some of the brutality that we've heard about, and we've met people. Part of our mission here has been also to meet people from different backgrounds, and we met medics yesterday, people who have been working on the front line as first aiders, but also as doctors and nurses, and we were quite shocked to hear about some of the brutality, including indecent assaults on women who have been taken into police custody. And I think that this is reprehensible, because in Hong Kong, which was once regarded as having the finest police force in Asia, there has been a massive reduction in trust in policing. There's an old saying that you can't have policing without consent, and consent has disappeared. So we heard one figure that where in the past less than 4% didn't trust the police, it's now over 50% say they don't trust the police. That trust has got to be restored. And it won't be restored while standoff continues at places like Polyeu. So I said in my earlier remarks, we now have an opportunity to make a fresh start. And I would plead with Carrie Lam to be seen visiting the university, to go and try and arbitrate and find a way out for the students who remain there so that they can start again. I think to be holed up there indefinitely, some of them without proper food, medical care, some of them suicidal, what kind of start is this to life? By contrast, we saw this massive outpouring by young people yesterday, many of them exercising their franchise for the first time in their lives, being able to participate in the life of this community. So we need to draw people in who are on the fringes. Otherwise, they themselves will become alienated and have nothing to do with this society or with its institutions in the longer term. So this is not a moment to be wasted. This is a time where the authorities in the city, instead of shrugging their shoulders and suggesting that policing has nothing to do with them, if you are the chief executive, the buck stops with you, and it's your duty to go there to arbitrate and to do something about it. And I think that given the goodwill that came out of yesterday's election and this unprecedented turnout, there is an opportunity here now. And Carpe Diem, seize the moment. If she doesn't, I think that Hong Kong will regret it.
Thank you very much. Just note, before you ask the question, please state your organisation and how we can call you. 如果係想廣東話問嘅問題都 OK 嘅，但係想講翻你係邊個機構同埋點樣稱呼，唔該晒啊。咁下一個問題啊，next question please.
Hi, I'm freelance, but I worked with a major newspaper's editorial page here under British rule and have followed this by since. And I have two questions. One very specific and the other more general. First, have you asked to see Carrie Lam? And if you have, what has she said? And second, Beijing is not famous for graciously accepting statements of liberal democracy. You will go home, many others will go home, and many big things will continue to play out. What can the rest of the world do on top of the things we're already hearing to help with this?
Do you want me to take this? Or?
The simple answer to the specific question, no, we have not asked, nor we asked.
I wrote to her, actually. I wrote to her.
The organization has not arranged a meeting with Carrie Lam on behalf of the whole delegation.
Thanks, Andy. I'll just add to that yes, when the violence was at its worst last week, I wrote along with two other parliamentarians, Baroness Northover and Baroness Bennett, the former leader of the Green Party, Baroness Northover, who's a Liberal Democrat, and the three of us wrote a letter to Carrie Lam, pleading with her to personally engage and involve in helping to resolve this continuing confrontation and crisis. We haven't had a reply to that letter. I hope that there will be a response, but more importantly than a reply to us would be for her to go and be there on the ground. Your second question, which was about, in a way, what difference is this going to make in China? Well, two systems in one country, they should be informing one another, those two systems. And instead of trying to change Hong Kong, I think that Beijing has a great deal it can learn from Hong Kong and from the way that people have lived a democratic life in the free air of Hong Kong for decades. And it would be a tragedy if this was to go into reverse. And I raised in the parliamentary debate that I initiated last month in Parliament, we had a 3-hour debate, I mentioned some of the negatives that I've seen over these last few years. I felt that China was on the right trajectory after the tragedy of Tiananmen Square and maybe 10,000 people massacred, pro-democracy campaigners, many of them young people. After that, Jiang Zemin seemed to move in the right direction. We saw some signs of reform. But I think it's a tragedy that the clock seems to be going backwards. And you look at Western China, I visited Western China, you look at what's happening in Xinjiang, and only last week we saw a cache of papers that have been released suggesting that more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims are in indoctrination centres being reprogrammed, exactly the sort of things that happened during the Cultural Revolution. So let's not go back to that. Let's see the Hong Kong model, which is a successful model, one that ought to be the envy of the world. Let's not see it asphyxiated, but let's see the good practice of Hong Kong spread across mainland China, so that a country which I deeply admire, I have a great love of China, its civilization, its culture, but its ideology is not something I admire, and I think that needs to change and be fundamentally reformed. And you've heard from my colleagues, particularly to my left here, of the momentous changes that have occurred in Europe. So when people say, oh, it'll never happen, that all happened much more quickly than people imagined at the time in 1989. And although it's still a work in progress, we all accept that. But nevertheless, we saw change. It can come about. And authoritarian leaders, they may vote themselves presidents for life, but their lifetimes are limited. And things can change more fundamentally than you may imagine. But I think Mantas will probably add something from his own experiences, or Miriam?
Your question was what other countries, what the free world can do. And I'm old enough to remember what it was like to live under the Soviet Union and how isolated one felt. And I hope that Hong Kongers will never feel as isolated and as deprived of this support, both moral and political, from the democratic world. So what the democratic countries can do is two things. Never forget Hong Kong and never exchange sort of concern for Hong Kong into for the benefit of some economic deal or other. So never sacrifice principles and exercise political pressure wherever it is applicable and possible if there are human rights violations. And I think the change might come in faster than we think. On the edge of this sort of velvet revolutions in Eastern Europe, we thought that sort of the future was pretty much sort of hopeless and bleak. But continuous work of Democrats, both then and now, I think, sort of can create conditions of a different order.
Yeah.
Maybe I will add one more sentence. Is that I think one of the major conditions would be that the democratic world will not prioritize business before human rights, because we know that only countries which adhere to human rights and adhere to freedom are having a future of positive business development, cultural development, and life expectancy. So we believe that the condition is really based on the human rights, and we should not swap the two priorities, because otherwise that could lead to situations where the democratic world will not be able to adhere to its own principles. Thank you.
Very good point.
Thank you very much. And we have the... One second.
咁我用中文問問題係，其實我三個問題嘅，我係第幾件試過嘅。第一個就其實我想問下你哋喺香港所觀察嘅，因為而家中共嘅輿論，包括喺海外嘅啲華人啊、西方輿論都係將香港啲抗爭者，特別係勇武抗爭者係講係暴徒嘅，話佢哋暴力行為升級咁樣，所以係不斷要去打壓。呢個係第一，想睇下你哋嘅實際嘅觀察。第二咧就係佢哋將呢一個香港嘅運動咧，就話係外國勢力去操控嘅。不過呢幾日嘅輿論係話美國從頭到尾啊，或者係外國勢力去操控呢一次香港嘅運動啦。咁你哋嘅反應係點？第三咧，特朗普總統咧就話佢係今次係阻止咗習近平去出兵去鎮壓呢場運動嘅。 咁其實你哋會唔會擔心其實香港呢個六四屠殺會繼續存在嘅咁樣？唔該晒。
你講啦，香港問題我哋講香港問題。
多謝你嘅問題。
We could do an interpreter
香港
actually tell us what's
呢一場運動喺6月好早期嗰陣，林鄭月娥嘅政府
Hong Kong
清楚咁去
Hong
表達
Kong
咗
protester has been
和平
branded
嘅
as
香港抗爭者
rioters.
如果你
Violent
和
rioters.
平
Do you
去
agree with that?
表達你嘅
And
訴
secondly,
求咧，
Beijing has been saying it's foreign influence.
係咪表示咁你就可以好即係肆無忌憚咁去用武力去表達你嘅訴求咧？唔係，但係香港人唔會因為你唔理我就滅自己聲。香港人喺我哋爭取我哋本來應有嘅自由、人權同埋公義嗰陣，我哋會用一切方法將我哋嘅訴求講出嚟，俾香港其他人聽，俾國際社會聽。我哋會用一切方法去爭取，去一齊去起呢一個香港呢個城市我哋自己嘅未來。你跟住話有關外國勢力嘅指控，其實應該調翻轉頭問點解會指控外國勢力？係咪有人諗到有人啲外國勢力俾錢定係啲乜嘢嘅嘢？如果唔係佢好直接啲講，佢無稽之談嚟，其實因為你如果唔係咁你講乜嘢都得㗎。咁我哋係咪全部都要回應啊？係啊，唔係係啊，唔係。我哋覺得尋日，尤其係尋日，我哋見到有超過70%嘅選民出嚟投票，而個結果唔係啲5波咁嘅結果嚟嘅，係好清楚一面倒指向民主嗰邊嘅，已經好清楚咁樣表達呢個係香港人嘅民意，唔到任何一個外國勢力去將佢推向邊一邊嘅，係香港人用自己嘅選票，用自己嘅能力企出嚟，做一個變相公投，俾全世界嘅人睇到，香港民意支持民主，香港人支持民主，香港人要喺香港實行民主。至於特朗普總統有冇阻止或者係勸過我哋習近平出唔出兵？我諗可能要等美國嘅議會睇下有冇興趣睇下佢嘅文件，睇下佢嘅對話記錄。我哋作為外人，我哋無從知道佢同解放軍嗰邊講過啲乜嘢，我哋都冇辦法獨立咁去證明、去搜證，到底有冇啲解放軍準備攻入嚟係點樣？但係唔好講到解放軍，當香港警察可以喺近距離10厘米咁嘅地方，用一支手槍射去一個市民嘅心口，可以用一隊防暴警察追一啲嘅市民，將佢逼到跳樓、墮樓，可以圍一個大學，圍裏邊香港嘅市民，唔俾佢哋出嚟，以致入邊已經人道災難都仲要繼續落嘅話， 我哋嚟講，大彷彿我哋自己已經遭受緊，至少係半軍事式嘅迫害。但係喺呢個背景底下，香港人選擇嘅係繼續堅定咁去企出嚟，爭取我哋本來大家都相信、大家共有嘅應有嘅共同價值、自由、公義、港人治港。一個地方嘅人可以決定佢自己一個地方嘅政府係點樣運作，可以決定自己嘅將來，本來就係普世價值嚟。呢個係我哋堅持嘅信念，唔會因為有人威脅我哋，無論你係用武力、和平、台面、台底嘅手段，點樣去威嚇我哋，我哋查到咁自己嘅選票證明到，主流香港民意係會堅持、堅定咁去繼續爭取我哋相信嘅自由、民主、公義、港人治港。多謝。
Thank you.
Perhaps I can add, using my Canadian perspective, to answer your question. So the question is actually twofold. What our views are towards the allegation that the rioters, the protesters are rioters. Do we agree with that? The second one is the democratic movement has been branded as having foreign influence. Well, I can assure you the second question first, that with the huge deficit that Canadian government has, we have no money to support Hong Kong rioters or the protesters. But joking aside, from the outside looking in, it is nothing short of marvel to see first 600,000 people march on the street, 1 million people march on the street, and then 2 million people march on the street. Without a major incident, without people getting killed, let alone, fire bombing at the 2 million protest. To the outsider, like ordinary Canadians, this demonstrated the commitment of Hong Kong civil society's pursuit of a peaceful political resolution to a political problem. To the outsider, to Canadians, we were also surprised by how determined the government has been not to apply a political solution to a political problem. Instead, they engage the police force in trying to resolve this. And to nobody's surprise, 6 months later, this is where we are. But to the second question, so to answer your first question, rioters or Boto, these are violent rioters. If my memory serves me right, they've been branded as violent rioters early June, June 12th, if I recall. The government has already branded them as rioters, violent rioters. And to respond to that, government actually started firing tear gas directly straight at the demonstrators. It's hard for us to fathom what the logic behind branding 2 million people as rioters. If you could actually get 2 million people so excited that they would actually go riot, well, there's something wrong with your political system. In regard of the foreign countries' control, I was joking, but the people from the outside world are so admired and inspired by the Hong Kong protesters, their ingenuity, their creativity, their innovation, their adoptions of high technology, their imaginations, and their humor. And, you know, these are nothing that, short of billions and trillions of dollars, money can buy in technology world that I used to serve. You can't even guarantee your investment will actually pay back with such marvelous results as we have seen with advertisement, with musical creation, with cartoons, memes, and all that. And this is not just in the latest anti-extradition. If you actually know a little bit about what happened in Hong Kong in the past 20-some years, it's been continuing since 2003, 2012, 2014, and now 2019 throughout various struggles. And so to say that there are foreign influence in all that, well, that country has to be very rich and wealthy and determined and committed. And to be frank with you, I really cannot think of any countries that actually have gone through that, because we all know that, you know, throughout the world in that 20-some years, there are generations of governments that came and went. The Democrats, Republicans, left-wing, right-wings, conservative, liberals, and, you know, you have to be logical about it. From my perspective, from the outsider, as a lowly Canadian, we just couldn't find the evidence or any hint that it could happen. 用廣東話講次個問題就係暴徒嘅問題。6月嘅時候已經有好多示威者咧係被稱為暴徒，咁但係對海外尤其是我哋加拿大人嚟講咧，見到有幾十萬嘅人、100萬嘅市民、200萬嘅市民喺街上面好有秩序咁，好似潮水式一樣嘅嚟到去湧出嚟。對我哋嚟講，我哋又冇辦法去想像，竟然係會咁安全，竟然係會咁冇事情發生。I just forgot one point that I would like to add in English first. I was doing a comparison. 2 million people out of a city of 7 million. It would be equivalent to, in Canada's context, we have 35 million people around the country, a big, huge country. It will be the equivalent of 10 million people marching on the street in Canada. With that size of a protest, let's not mention about the chief executive. You will have at least ministers' heads rolling on the street. You will have governments fall, and you will have repercussion, political repercussion. And we were stunned to see that in Hong Kong, as far as the political regime is concerned, nothing had actually happened. 我啱啱突然之間諗翻起咧，就係對我哋加拿大人嚟講咧，就諗翻有200萬人咧遊行嘅時候咧，喺我哋嘅國家有3500萬嘅加拿大人，即係換句講，照比例嚟講咧，係有1000萬嘅加拿大人喺街上面行。如果有1000萬嘅加拿大人去進行遊行示威嘅時候咧，唔單止話有任何嘅部長啊，有任何嘅廳長啊，佢哋嘅政治生涯會完結，成個政府都會倒台。咁但係對我哋外面呢啲可能係即係知識唔係好高嘅啲外國人嚟講咧，我哋會好驚訝見到香港嘅政府竟然係無動於衷，反而係用一啲軍警嘅暴力嚟到鎮壓呢啲嘢。咁所以對佢用一個暴徒嚟講咧，係實在令我哋冇辦法去用邏輯嘅方法去推斷啦。咁第二個問題係講話關於呢個外國勢力嘅操控啦，我啱啱都講。其實香港人喺成個抗爭運動上面所展示俾世界睇到嘅咧，係一個充滿咗活力、充滿咗想像力，亦都充滿咗創意，亦都係擁抱科技嘅一個好前衞嘅抗爭模式嚟嘅。我自己都有留意新聞啦，但我見唔到世界上有其他任何一個地區嘅抗爭咧係咁富有動感，係咁富有想像力。咁如果要用錢去買呢一切嘅時候咧，我相信世界係冇一個嘅國家係能夠去 guarantee 到佢做到有咁嘅效果嘅。咁再加上我啱啱都講過，呢個唔係一個短期，淨係話對於送中條例嘅一個抗爭啦，而 2003年嘅23條、2012年嘅國教運動、2014年嘅政改問題，到今次嘅2019年嘅反送中啦。咁每一次嘅運動，你都見到有呢一啲好有想像力嘅色彩嘅做法。佔領中環舉個例咧，你見到係完全和平嘅，竟然有啲嘅帳幕咧係幫啲學生去補習嘅，做功課嘅。咁所以我哋喺外國嘅人嚟講咧，睇翻嘅時候，一方面覺得係邏輯上唔可能啦，但另一方面咧覺得呢個指控係好 ridiculous 嘅一個指控好長嘅一個回答，唔好意思。
I cannot see it in Cantonese, but from your questions I see what arguments and what narratives will be used by Beijing to minimize the right of the results of this election. And I think this is in danger of missing the point of this huge turnout and this huge surge of popular will. And the message which is sent is that 2.9 million people did not turn up because they want better waste management and better public transport schemes. This is a vote for democratic representation, not at the district council level, but also at the high levels. And I think this is an expression of the Hong Kong people's quest for democratic representation at the legislative council and executive levels, for the right to elect their true representatives. But you shouldn't miss that message when reporting it.
Thank you. Due to time constraints, we will move on to the last question.
Two last questions.
Let's take the two together.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey. I'm a freelance. I've been following the tour for 2 days already, and I've been talking with some of the members. You guys on field for half a day and see a lot of what's going on in the voting center. Some of you guys refer to smooth, professional, peaceful, friendly. Okay, there's a scene yesterday outside of Poly University. The tour can go to talk to one of the commanders there. Very friendly, very polite. And as a reporter in Hong Kong, I've been following the anti-China exhibition for 5 months already. This is the first time I saw a police is that kind of friendly to a foreigner. Okay. But my question is, do you think the Hong Kong government are trying to be very friendly to make a propaganda or make an illusion for you guys to think Hong Kong is still very peaceful, you still have democracy, you guys can still vote? Do you think they're trying to do that kind of fake stuff to you guys to misinterpret what is going on in Hong Kong? Thank you.
Get the second question.
Yeah. Take the other question as well. Gentleman there.
Thanks everybody for their efforts and insights. It's Paul from the Epoch Times New York office. Our newspaper a few weeks ago was one of the only 2 major newspapers not to run a full-page paid political advert condemning the protesters. And subsequently, maybe 1 week later, 4 masked men broke into our printing shop and set fire to the printing shop and almost burned it down. And what I wanted to ask was intimidation and abuse of the media within your oversight? And if it was, did you find any irregularities in that area?
Would you like to take that? Well, there are 2 questions there. So the first one is, do I think that the Hong Kong authorities ran yesterday as a propaganda exercise to fool foreigners? Well, they did a pretty good job then in that case, because when you look at the extraordinary turnout and the way that people conducted themselves, look, just think back a few days ago, who was it who called for peace and for order to take place on the day of the elections? It was the pro-democracy campaigners. It wasn't the Hong Kong government. In fact, in many ways, they would have quite liked to have seen disorder so that they could have cancelled the elections, or even halfway through voting yesterday, if there had been violence on the streets, stop the voting from continuing, especially when they might have started to see which way the poll was going. So I think it's exactly the opposite of what you've described, and I think this is a great propaganda victory for the people of Hong Kong. The second question was specifically about the Epoch Times. I've written a little bit about that myself, and the point I made is not within the mandate, obviously, of our observations about the election to talk specifically about the attack on your printing press, but it certainly was part of our remit to look at the issue of free speech. And one thing we picked up from one of the candidates that we spoke to yesterday was the fear of saying more controversial things during the campaign which might have excited violence or antagonism against him. So I think that people were self-controlling themselves in what they could say for that reason. And that isn't a good place to be. So I would make one observation about this, which is that Article 19 of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that there must be freedom of expression, freedom of information, that media, press must have the opportunity to transmit information and for people to be able to inform their opinions as a consequence. And I can see that not just Article 19, but many other articles in the 30 articles in the UDHR certainly are violated in many parts of Asia, and they have been under increasingly tough attack in parts of Hong Kong, and I think that people must be very alive to that and defend these fundamental freedoms. I'm going to may as well just drift into the previous question by saying one thing about the two contested visions of society that I think that we're seeing that these elections also represented, because when we hear complaints about outside interference, well, we were invited here by civil society organisations in Hong Kong. We didn't come of our own volition. We were invited to come and observe, and we've tried to do that honestly and openly. But ultimately, it was down to the people of Hong Kong how they conducted the elections, whether they participated in them, and they've given their answer to that. I think it's Beijing that needs to ask itself some questions about, as it were, outside interference. When you look at the revelations made this week by the first very high-ranking defector who defected in Australia, who's talked about the infiltration of institutions, academic institutions and universities around the world. When you think about surveillance technology, some of it being sold into the United Kingdom, for instance, by the very people who have provided it in the camps in Xinjiang. When you think about Belt and Road and the indebtedness of so many developing countries, you could say that this is outside interference too. We've all got to live on the same planet, and we need to find ways of coexisting and living alongside one another. So there are two contested views. One is autocracy, and that's one party, one system. And the other one is democracy, which in a modified form is two systems in one country. And all of us here believe in the unity of the country. We want harmony for the whole country. We want peace, and we want progress, and we want reform. So we're not here to try and divide, quite the reverse. We want to see genuine unity, but the contested view for the future is that we don't think that can be achieved through autocracy. We do believe it can be achieved through democracy, and that will be based on the rule of law and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and a passion for democracy and things like free speech. And when authoritarians and totalitarians find it necessary to come and firebomb the printing presses of Epoch Times, that tells you all you need to know about those two contested visions.
Now, we also have 14 other members of the mission that are on the floor there, so I would like to pass the mic to them to actually make comments and address some of the questions, perhaps.
Thank you very much. My name is, I'll stand up. My name is Vicky Dunn. I'm a member of the Legislative Assembly for the Australian Capital Territory, a sub-national parliament in Australia, and I am an 18-year veteran of parliamentary service. I want to pay my respects to these groups who have organised our visit here and pay tribute to the enthusiasm and professionalism that I've experienced with this very diverse group of people that I've worked with over the past weekend, and I thank you for your contribution and commitment to democracy. I'm here because I am a committed Democrat, and I am committed to orderly elections and great election processes. I can only echo the words of Lord Alton, that what we witnessed yesterday was an orderly election. I must admit that I came here personally with some trepidation that our presence could be considered divisive, but wherever we went yesterday, we were thanked and very warmly welcomed by people in the street, and it was a very uplifting experience, and I think that it is a testament to the thirst for freedom and democracy that the people of Hong Kong have demonstrated overnight, and the election result is a clear message that the people in Hong Kong want a better manifestation of their autonomy within the system that they have been living under since 1987, and I hope that I can help to contribute in a very small way to the increase of the democratic process in Hong Kong.
Hi, I'm Luke from the United Kingdom. I really have nothing to add to what's been said. I think it's been an extremely comprehensive overview of our few days here. I think the only thing I would want to say and underline is that it has been the largest democratic exercise in this city's history. This is a great triumph, and it comes after a long period of disquiet, which has affected the people of the city very deeply, but beyond, we've all felt it, which is why we're here. I think I would echo what everybody on the panel has said. This presents a unique opportunity to draw all of this to a close. There is now a window, and we hope that that window is taken. So I think if we have a message from our campaigners in the UK, including those who can't be here because they're not allowed in, and I would particularly mention Ben Rogers, who's done so much in the campaign for Hong Kong and on behalf of Hong Kong, but who is not allowed to be here with us, very unfortunately. To all of those people in the UK, this has been a wonderfully encouraging exercise, and we're in awe of the people of Hong Kong.
Hi, my name is Silje Eholm. I'm a member of the Liberal Alliance youth organization from Denmark. First of all, I'm also, like Vicky said, a Democrat, and as a student from Denmark, I think it's very important to be here and especially support the youth movement and the fight for democracy and freedom. I don't think I have anything else to add other than it's very important that we internationally stand together and support the fight for freedom and stand in Hong Kong.
My name is Stine River, and I'm the president of the Liberal Alliance Youth in Denmark as well. And it has been such a pleasure to be here, and I'm thankful for the invitation. I think it's important in Western countries, in Denmark as well, that we support universal values that we have built our societies upon in Europe, in the Western world, and in Denmark as well. That is why I am here, and that is why I support Hong Kong and the fight for freedom. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marlene, and I'm the head of the secretary in Liberal Alliance Youth in Denmark. I would just like to say thank you for the invite to be here and for the opportunity. It has been a pleasure, and I would like to agree with all the others what have been said. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
My name is Christopher. I'm the vice president of the Liberal Youth in Sweden, and first of all, I would like to extend my thanks for being invited here and take part in this election and observe it. And I would also like to stress the importance of freedom of speech in this country, and especially for candidates in a political election.
Thank you very much. I'm also from the Liberal Youth in Sweden, and I'm the international officer. And first of all, thank you very much for receiving us here in Hong Kong. It's been a great experience to be here. And I would like to stress the hunger we have seen from the Hong Kong people for democracy. I think there is really sends a signal that, as you also said in the panel, that Hong Kong has hunger for more democracy, not less. And I hope this will continue. Thank you.
My name is Emil Skilaris, and I'm also from the Liberal Youth of Sweden. First of all, I want to say a big thank you for welcoming us here. It's been a wonderful trip, and thank you for everyone who has organized it. You're doing a really good and important job. But mostly, I want to say thank you for all the people who are fighting for democracy and freedom in Hong Kong. It's something we from Sweden is guaranteed every day, and I think it's easy to forget how hard it can be for some people. So thank you for reminding us, and I hope that we will be able to support you in your fight. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, hello, my name is Simona Morrison, and I'm a Liberal politician from Sweden. And I would like to maybe start off with what the gentleman asked about us talking to the police yesterday outside PolyU. Yeah, of course it's different when we come here. And we come and we have badges that show that we're international observant. They will treat us differently, and we have seen it also late night yesterday at one of the polling stations. And to be really frank, it's about many of us are politicians. We never need to risk our lives for doing politics. We never need to risk our family's safety or even our contact with our families for the politics that we will drive for. So I think we're not just observants here, we also need to carry what we've seen, and we need to act on what we've seen. So we actually do something about it. Because it's 2019 and the biggest threat is China to the society and to the democracy. And that is something that we need to carry with us. But a big thank you for the organizers for giving us the opportunity to actually carry this and act on it.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Koo. I come from Malaysia. And as some of you will know, 18 months ago, just over 18 months ago, Malaysia went through a dramatic political transformation in the sense that we had our first change in democratic government for 62 years. Mm-hmm. So I have some experience in thinking about something which is almost impossible, and yet it happens. So I'm very encouraged by the exercise in democracy that we witnessed yesterday. And I would just have one comment to make. There will be those who will say that yesterday was a culmination of a whole series of events, a culmination of campaigns, a culmination of some of the dramatic events that have been occurring in Hong Kong over the last few months. I see it as the beginning, not the end. I see it as an expression of a willingness to embrace democracy in its fullest possible terms. And I would encourage the relevant authorities looking at the situation in Hong Kong to acknowledge the thirst for democracy of the people of Hong Kong and to give it its full and free expression and development so that the people of Hong Kong can enjoy the fullest form of participative and inclusive democracy that is possible for them, which is what they want. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Thomas. I'm from the Social Liberal Party of Denmark. It has been a great honor to be on the board, and I would like first to say thank you to the people of Hong Kong. Everywhere we have been met by people who met us with open arms and was very happy for us being here. And it's been a great pleasure to talk to voters, to people who are running for us, and also the people who are the elected officials. there's one thing I'm taking out of this trip especially, that we don't have people for the sake of our leaders. We have leaders for the sake of our people. And it's the leaders' job to help the people. It's not the opposite way. And I think what we have seen in Hong Kong is not people who are, it's not leaders who are helping their people. For example, yesterday we met Jimmy Chow, a guy just a bit older than me. I think we had a lot in common, fighting for freedom. The big difference between him and me is he was assaulted because of this fight. I've never been. And I think that leadership in Hong Kong should now stand up and try actually to protect the people, because leaderships are only elected and are only in place to help the people get better lives. It's not the different way around.
I'm Mike Powell from the United States with Americans for Passion Forum. I just want to follow up on what my Swedish colleague said over here. And I do think it's important to note that while the police were very polite to us, while we were standing outside the university, they did very politely also explain that the students trapped inside were conditioned for them to receive medical treatment, was conditioned upon them surrendering, coming out, and also being arrested. I was fortunate to come here, to be invited. It was an honor to just be able to walk the streets with people of Hong Kong and really see the hopefulness that is driving this movement. Upon coming here, we saw the United States Congress pass the Hong Kong bill with near unanimous support. Yesterday, it was passed around to the New York Times, led with the front page story of Hong Kong. The president has made clear that he will stand with the people of Hong Kong. I think that's when I address the fact that if you return home, it is clear that the people of the United States very strongly support the Hong Kongers. Thank you for letting me be here.
Very good.
Thank you very much for all the delegates and for everyone for joining with us. I'm afraid this is the end of the press conference, but thank you very much for joining us. And thank you once again for the delegates who are joining us in Hong Kong and witnessing what is happening in our city. Thank you.
Excuse me. If we would have a award presentation ceremony for Joshua Wong as well, that was kindly bring this award to Hong Kong at
3:30.
3:30.
Strategy Room 4.
Strategy Room 4 this hotel. So everybody's invited to witness the award presentation ceremony. And I will do that again in presence. 我哋多謝我哋多有層就帶咗黃之鋒個獎嚟香港。咁陣間我哋3點會喺呢間酒店 Strategy 4嗰間房嗰度會有一個頒獎儀式俾黃之鋒嘅。咁歡迎大家出席。
Very good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry.
I write freelance.
In Beijing?
No, here.
Oh, in Hong Kong?
We used to have a kids edition in Hong Kong long ago.
Nice meeting with Claudia.
Thank you. Is there something
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I just won in a few days ago.
Yeah.
I became a member of parliament only a month ago, so they have not printed me any business card
Well, where
yet.
do I reach?
If you don't mind, I just write it down.
I'm emailing if I remember if I could. I actually am based in New York, but I've been over here. It's my 4th trip since June. I love the city. You make great sense. I would only be in touch if I would
Thank you. This is my personal cell phone, so bit discretion would be appreciated.
It goes nowhere beyond me, and I will only be in touch if it's something where, and
do you want my card?
Cardi.
In the unlikely event that China past year